Highlights then for the Rookie Cup for the World Centre of Racing, round number 3, the Daytona International Speedway. Philip Cravey would have a better start in the front row of the grid and would beat out poleman Bo Dixon down into the first corner. Enzo Filipao hanging on to third. Sven Mackenberg, however, moving up into fourth position. The battle for fifth position would see Renault going around the outside of Hendricks, all the way around the outside of the International Horseshoe, giving the inside line through the dogleg and up towards the West Horseshoe. A super move from Renault. Meanwhile, Hendricks having to fight off Borzok behind. There was a little bit of contact between Gerhard on the right-hand side in the black and gold car, and then Schubeck in the yellow and black. A little bit of contact going through the bus stop, and it was Schubeck that would come out on top. Meanwhile, Sousa had to wait behind. Villacravia, our race leader, though, would make a mistake into the first corner, allowing Bo Dixon to retake over the race lead. And then these big battle packs behind. Grillo being pushed through the middle by Guides and nearly got alongside Schubeck as well, sending it all the way around the outside of the back end of the top 10. Meanwhile, Grillo would go wide, drop a few positions, but right back into the middle of this almighty train. Villacravia was under pressure from Enzo Filipao, who was not enjoying hanging on to third position. He wanted that second and he wanted to get after Bo Dixon for a race lead, especially as Villacravia was making a couple of mistakes, hanging out the rear end just a touch coming through the West Horseshoe. Filipao had to wait for now. Sven Mackenberg coming back onto the scene. Then Enzo Filipao onto the oval would decide to sit behind Villacravia, try and push him up to the rear end of Bo Dixon and focus on a race victory. Meanwhile, on board with Hendricks, who nearly got into the rear end of Borzok coming through the fast chicane at the bus stop. He'd skip over, only amazingly losing the one position to Renault, managing to fight off Marvin Mackenberg as they head round NASCAR 3 and 4 and back onto the start-finish straight. Villacravia was down the inside of Enzo Filipao trying to defend as they'd caught back up to Bo Dixon, but Enzo Filipao read that one brilliantly. The up and under and second position went the way of Filipao. Meanwhile, Renault was trying to attack Borzok, who'd gone out wide into the West Horseshoe, dragged out Renault with him, and then sliding out in front of the likes of Sousa and Guides. A very big shame for some of those in the mid-pack that were looking for a decent top 10 finish. Schieferdecker would make a mistake coming through the bus stop whilst trying to get past the returning Guides, and unfortunately skip over the chicane, losing a few positions. Meanwhile, Marvin Mackenberg was trying to hang on to fifth spot. Schubeck was the one trying to wrestle that one off of him. And coming down to the International Horseshoe, it was a move all the way around the outside for the black and yellow of Schubeck to take over fifth position. Marvin Mackenberg dropped down to sixth, and also Borzok was trying to get involved in the fight also. Back to the battle, though, up with our race leaders as Enzo Filipao was trying to steal it away from Bo Dixon. The inside of the International Horseshoe was the route that he chose, on board with Villacravia, looking for any sort of mistake. But Enzo Filipao into the West Horseshoe would take over the race lead. Bo Dixon dropping back a spot. Mackenberg would lose out to Borzok coming into the first corner, but then Borzok went for another move the next lap with this outrageous send down the inside, trying to remove Schubeck from fifth position and take it for himself, and would certainly do so on this occasion. Up the order, though, Enzo Filipao was under a lot of pressure and he cracked under it. Bo Dixon was applying it. Enzo Filipao out wide. He dropped back to second position, but would still hang on to second over Villacravia. Meanwhile, back to this fight as Mackenberg was having to fend off Gerhard. Also watching the battle ahead, he would lose out to Gerhard, dropping back to 8th position, but still up front there was some big battles. Gerhard with a big send down the inside of Borzok, maybe a little bit too hard down the inside of Borzok, and it wouldn't quite work out on that occasion, but they'd make contact into the next corner also with a little bit of a brush, and that was Marvin Mackenberg's opportunity to take over the 7th spot as Borzok got pushed out wide. Enzo Filipao, though, was trying to take over the race lead. This time he would do so with a superior run out onto the NASCAR oval. He would take over the race lead, and Villacravia was left waiting, wondering when his opportunity would arise, and almost immediately he would have one to take over second from Bo Dixon, who'd be out wide. And suddenly this would become a battle for the race lead, though, because Enzo Filipao out wide going into the International Horseshoe. There were 3 wide off of it. Enzo Filipao getting squeezed off just a touch, and Villacravia taking over the race lead. Couple of light mistakes, though, and Cravey was again feeling the pressure. Onto the last lap of the race, and Bo Dixon looking for 3 consecutive victories in the Rookie Cup. We'd get to the outside of the West Horseshoe, and that would just about give him the race lead. But Villacravia wasn't going to roll over, wasn't going to wait. He was desperate to take this victory. He'd be on the outside going on to NASCAR 1 and 2. He'd get a little bit of assistance from Enzo Filipao, who would take over second position. And going down to the bus stop, it was Villacravia taking over the race lead with just a couple of corners left to go. It would be a drag race to the line, that when they got to it, it was Villacravia who was going to come out on top from Filipao and from Dixon.